What is up, guys? It is the Bluebloods here, back with y'all, man, with another episode, man. We're gonna continue this fall camp storylines, man. Yesterday's episode was a pretty big hit. Lots of comments, lots of interaction. So, pick three new teams, three new storylines, three new updates just for you guys, man. So make sure if you're new, if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. Turn on your post notifications because we got a bunch of special episodes dropping all through the week. We're in the midst of our college football preview. We've went through the SWAC, the AAC, the Sun Belt, the ACC, the Big Ten was recorded yesterday, so make sure to go check those out. Saturday, 7 p.m. Central Time, live right here on YouTube, Twitter, and our Facebook. We are also doing a Big 12 preview, man, live for you guys. So make sure to join, get your comments in, get your opinions in, and we hope to see y'all there on Saturday. And today we got some SEC news, we got some Big 12 news. So let's get right into it. And this one I can speak a little bit better on, especially being a writer for Fly War Eagle. We got the Auburn Tigers, and really the fall camp storyline I want to focus on is one, this idea that consistency is the buzzword. And then kind of go into some people who have emerged at wide receiver, O line, talk about some Bo Nix versus TJ Finley developments, things like that. So the reason I named it consistency is the buzzword is because really and truly that's what it is. Brian Harsin has come in, and in every press conference, everything he's addressed, effort leads to consistency, and consistency leads to success on the field. And there was a quote from Derek Mason's press conference, the new defensive coordinator last week, where he said, "A lot of people want perfection. I'm not looking for perfection. I'm looking for consistency. I can trust that. I know what that looks like." These coaches understand that there's a lot of these players who are being overlooked right now who have a lot of question marks surrounding them. So the biggest thing for Auburn is to find players who can consistently execute the game plan, consistently make plays on the field. And that's really going to be the key for the Tigers. And when you look at what he's coming into, Auburn had a lot of holes. They had a big hole at safety next to Smoke Monday. They have a lot of questions on the defensive line, especially after Big Cat announced his transfer this past offseason. And Tyrone Truesdale is not with the team as Brian Harsin announced late last week. So those are two big starters with a lot of experience that are missing from this Auburn roster from last year. And for me, it's a big rebuild for Harsin, and I think expectations are all over the place. I think I've seen him as low as 11th in the SEC, which is crazy, and as high as probably third in the division, right there behind either LSU in Alabama or A&M in Alabama. So it really depends on who you're looking at there. But Harsin has a long way to go, and some of the big question marks that he's had to solve are the offensive line has been atrocious these past few years. And I know there was that one LSU site, I think it was either the SB Nation site or the fan sided site that said Auburn had the best O line in the SEC. That's just not true. If you look at any sort of statistics, watch any sort of film, they were not the best offensive line in the SEC. Then you also had a lot of people wondering if Bo Nix could keep the quarterback job over incoming transfer TJ Finley from LSU. There were a lot of Auburn fans that were really, really high on him coming in here and pushing Nix to either get better and be more consistent in the big games, or Finley's going to take your job. And then you also had the wide receiver question because outside of before they landed Demetrius Robertson out of Georgia, and former Cal wide receiver as well, former 5-star who just hasn't really lived up anywhere yet to his what his 5-star billing was. There wasn't anyone on the Auburn roster that had more than like 20 catches in a game. So the wide receiver room is probably one of the youngest in the country that we've seen. Got a lot of new faces. And for Nix, who's kind of walking into a do or die year, that's not what you want to hear, is that the offensive line and the wide receiving unit isn't really living up to the standard. And out of camp, it was immediate, even though Demetrius Robertson got there late. According to all insider reports, he has been forming a connection with Bo Nix rapidly. That, and I think the most recent practice and or scrimmage, he was clearly heads and leaps and bounds above the next wide receiver. So you're looking at Demetrius Robinson to really lead that wide receiving room. Now Xavier Capers is a capable wide receiver. A lot of people like Shedrick Jackson, Tavares Dawson, and J.J. Evans as well. And there was a lot of talk about, whether any of these guys could break out and be a go-to wide receiver. Because as we know, Auburn lost Seth Williams, Anthony Schwartz, both for the NFL draft, and Eli Stove also graduated. I think he tore his ACL in camp, so he won't be playing in the NFL this year. But on top of that, when you look at what the storylines coming out of camp, it's who on the defensive line could be most consistent. Tyrone Truesdale's gone. I even forgot to mention Jaquan Newkirk also transferred to Florida. So it's three guys who were significant contributors. Derek Mason runs a 3-4, and it looks like Tony Fair, defensive tackle from UAB, has really taken the lead at that nose spot in this 3-4 defense. Colby Wooden is probably the top edge rusher. And when you look at, someone like a JJ Pegues who made the move from tight end to D tackle this year, he is another name you need to watch out for on the inside. And of course, true freshman Lee Hunter, the highest rated player in Auburn's most recent class, will probably find a role somewhere on this team. Nick Eason really likes Marcus Harris and Derek Hall at the other edge rusher spot, that other buck spot. So look for those names. And Nick Easton has been doing an outstanding job, has been saying all the right things. Him and Derek Mason seem to have a lot of chemistry. So I really like that. And offensive line, the word used was cross training. I think Harsin used cross breeding at one point to talk about how offensive linemen were moving around. Everyone's taking snaps at different positions. But right now, the guys that I think you want to look for are Austin Troxel, Alec Jackson, Tayshawn Manning, Nick Brahms, and probably Brandon Council are your top five guys that have really separated themselves in camp. I think Jaleel Irvin could probably be that sixth guy that could slot in certain spots. I think for me, Irvin is more of a guard and center, so he can slide in that inside spot. And they think they probably need to find an outside guy that they feel comfortable with putting in there in case someone goes down with injury, which we've seen with Auburn in the recent years. Then before we move on, man, we just want to hit this quarterback thing. TJ Finley's been playing well, but right now it's really Bo Nix's job to lose. I know there was a lot of rumors about the most recent scrimmage where Bo Nix threw potentially 3 interceptions. It's been disputed. People have moved the number around, but we know turnovers were a big issue for all the quarterbacks. And the interesting thing is the best quarterback on the field, according to all reports, was Demetrius Davis, who was the true freshman out of Texas, one of the most accomplished quarterbacks in Texas high school football history. So that's an interesting thing to watch for the future is, can Demetrius Davis insert himself into the quarterback competition as Nix matures and leaves on from Auburn. But right now it's really Auburn, Finley, and then Demetrius Davis at that third spot. And I don't Harson's been asked, because Harson has run a 2 QB system. That's not the plan for Auburn. But and personally, I think if Nix comes out and struggles early, which they have Akron and Alabama State week 1 and 2, so I don't imagine him struggling too bad there. But if he goes out and really struggles against Penn State, that next week against Georgia State becomes even more important to get Finley ready, because LSU and that trip to Death Valley is week 5. And what a storyline if Finley can get that first start for Auburn against his former team in their stadium. The storylines would be tremendous to talk about. So that's the latest around the Auburn camp. I went a little bit longer because I know a little bit more about that Auburn camp, but I want to move to one of the biggest storylines of in the country, which is the quarterback battle at Texas. And Chip Brown over at Horns 247 has been doing an outstanding job reporting on this. And right now, Steve Sarkisian has not announced the starting quarterback. And right now, he kind of was critical of his quarterbacks and said that he had to give them some tough coaching at times. And he said that in the scrimmage they veered off from some of the fundamentals, the techniques, the reads and decision making that got them to that scrimmage. And he said that was a huge disappointment, is just not trusting what you've done and continuing to do it in that moment. So Steve Sarkisian, had that to say. And right now, Hudson Card, apparently, according to Horns 247, has been getting most of the reps with the first team offense. And during the first week of camps, Casey Thompson got the most reps. So it looks like Hudson Card might have taken a small lead, but they've still been rotating guys just about 50-50. And right now, Sarkisian feels like they've been responding to the coaching. But the thing I'm worried about is that there's sources that have told Horns 247, according to Chip Brown, that Thompson has had more interceptions than Card in camp, but Card has been less mobile in the pocket and has less pocket awareness and presence, and he's been taking a lot of sacks. And I was listening to Josh Pate from 247 Sports, and he made a really good point. I want to echo that here. You don't want to have to name a starter at quarterback. You want that spot to be earned. And that's something that, I really wasn't thinking about, but that's a really good point, is you don't want to just have to say, okay, by default, because they've been playing so bad, this guy's the starter. You want to say we had a great competition. Either one of these guys could start, but this guy earned it. This guy fought for it, and this guy is our starter because he's the best guy for the job. So Texas is, I'm not going to lie, I'm a little bit concerned about Texas, because when you look at this team, the weakness is the wide receivers. And when you have a first year starting quarterback, to have a wide receiving issue is probably the last thing you realistically want if you're Texas. And I honestly feel like for them to succeed, they're going to need some help at wide receiver emerge. But right now, I'm not sure what the wide receiving room is. And I mean, if you're a Texas fan listening, you could let me know who you're excited about. But based on the field production, Texas is not deep at wide receiver. The offensive line, it has question marks surrounding it. So really and truly, I know all has been being made about Steve Sarkisian being this offensive guru, this amazing play caller that schemed Devontae Smith open, that schemed John Mechie and Jalen Waddle and Mac Jones, and he did all this stuff. But for that scheme to work, you have to have players to execute it. And so what I'm worried about here is that with a significant decrease in talent, can Steve Sarkisian still be that dynamic play caller that you can trust in the biggest situations? And I think Texas fans are putting a lot in on his pedigree to get it right, but really and truly it's down to the players to execute. You can scheme up everything you want, but until the players execute it and the talent is there, then that's a really all you got. And when you look at the team, I guess, scheduled for this next season, this is why I'm worried. You open up with Louisiana Lafayette, who beat the beat the second place team in your conference last year 31-14 week one because they weren't ready to play. So Louisiana Lafayette, a lot of people are looking at that as a game that Texas could drop. Texas, if that quarterback situation isn't worked out and that team doesn't come out ready to play, that's a losable game and they could get beat. And then you look at Arkansas week 2, who really and truly shocked the SEC last year. They should have won the Auburn game if the ref calls Bo Nix's backwards spike a backwards pass, which they should have. They were leading Georgia at halftime week 1, and that team played a lot of teams down the stretch really well. And a lot of SEC folks think Arkansas is going to take that next step. That's not a give me game. And then, you get Rice, who should beat Texas Tech, gave you some troubles, but you should be able to beat them. But then you got TCU and Oklahoma back-to-back weeks. And so there's no room for error in those first two games, because what you'd be looking at if you're Steve Sarkisian, if this quarterback battle doesn't work out in your favor, is you drop a Louisiana or an Arkansas, you're probably looking at a 3-3 record going into the back end of your schedule, in which you have some tough games. Oklahoma State's not going to be a pushover. Iowa State is a really, really tough team. And then you still have West Virginia, you still have Kansas State, who's going to be much improved because Texas caught them on the back end of, Skylar Thompson's injury. So I was blanking on the name there for a second, but this Texas defense is going to be pretty good in my opinion. I like the linebacker situation. I really like their D line. Can they place Joseph Asai at edge? But really, truly, that defense line is going to be there. They got some solid linebackers. The secondary is a bit of a question mark, but I think they got some players back there. So I think the defense is going to be there for Texas. The question is going to be the depth at wide receiver, and are they going to have a big enough passing game to help Bijan Robinson out? Because Bijan Robinson is going to be a factor. He's probably the best running back, or one of the best running backs in the country. He's gonna be able to get you some yards and everything. But what happens when teams start stacking the box? Is Casey Thompson or Hudson Card going to be able to bail you out and move the ball through the air well enough where teams can't just pinpoint where Bijan Robinson is going and stop you that way? So for me, this quarterback competition is huge here. And as we updated fall camp right now, no clear divide. It looks like neither guy is really just dominating uh, practice or fall camp or anything like that. So this is kind of a wait and see basis. So Hudson Card looks to be taking the more recent first team reps because Casey Thompson has a little bit of turnover trouble, according to our guys over at Horns 247. And so I'm really, really excited to see what happens. This is going to be a huge test on Steve Sarkisian. And is it his scheme or was it the players last year at Alabama? And I think it was a bit of both. But this first year is going to be a real tough test for Steve Sarkisian. And so this is going to be a storyline to watch coming out of Austin, Texas for the next few weeks. But let's move back to the SEC. And we have a quarterback competition that may be solved in Knoxville. And the Tennessee Volunteers, the Joe Milton era might have just begun in Tennessee, according to Vols 247, man. Patrick Brown over there. Um, they released a depth chart, and Joe Milton is the projected QB1 there. They said that all the sources indicate that Milton is going to get the first crack at the starting QB job. They have Hendon Hooker at 2A and Harrison Bailey at 2B. This is a huge, huge development. And in case you guys don't really know who Joe Milton is, he transferred from Michigan. He played 3 years there, saw action in 13 games, started 5 games last year, threw for 1,000 yards, 4 touchdowns, but had some interception troubles to say the least over there. And so he had more interceptions than touchdowns last year, got benched for Cade McNamara, who will be starting up at Michigan this next year. But this is an interesting development for me because so I'm gonna take it from a Joe Milton perspective first, and then I'll get to the Tennessee perspective as we wrap it up. This is an interesting thing in terms of Joe Milton because if he goes down here and Josh Heupel gets him to succeed, live up to all that potential he had coming out of Florida in high school, that is such an indictment on Jim Harbaugh. Because when Jim Harbaugh came to Michigan, he was viewed as an offensive guy. A quarterback whisperer. You got Andrew Luck, you got Colin Kaepernick, you got Alex Smith playing well. All these guys were playing well, and everyone was like, man, look at what he's going to be able to do with all this quarterback talent at Michigan. Well, now you're looking at it like, okay, it hasn't worked with anybody. And now Joe Milton's come down here and apparently lit up the Tennessee Volunteers fall camp. So for me, this could be a huge, huge black mark on the resume of Jim Harbaugh from his time at Michigan. And then also, it's a huge thing for Tennessee because the quarterback position with Jared Garantano has been so toxic, so up in the air. I know you had Harrison Bailey. I know you had Brian Moore. But right now, you look at what Joe Milton's bringing, and I think personally he offers up a much larger upside than Jared Garantano ever did. You're going to have the running game set, and I think Josh Heupel coming in is perfect for Joe Milton and even perfect for Hendon Hooker in the backup spot because you get an offensive-minded guy who I think is going to be able to mold his offense to the strengths of Joe Milton And I think you're really going to see Joe Milton thrive in this offense. And the only question I have is what is the expectations behind it? Because this, I think what he'll do is he'll be much improved in his decision making. Probably won't throw for more interceptions, touchdowns, and everything like that. But for me, what is the realistic expectation? Because there's so much turnover in Tennessee that I don't think any expectations should be thrown on Milton about leading this team to an SEC East title or even trying to make this team finish in the top three, man. If he just gets this team to 7-5, or even if 8-4 would be an A plus for me in terms of the turnover. They lost like 30 something players from their roster. They were losing recruits after signing day. This team was in so much turmoil, and Josh Heupel and Joe Milton would get an A plus for me if they can get this team to 8-4. And I'm excited to see if Joe Milton can use those tools, the size, the arm strength. I mean, when you look at him on paper, he should be one of the best quarterbacks in the country. And I just wonder if it was really the Michigan scheme that just really didn't suit him, or if Jim Harbaugh is trying to fit square pegs into his round hole for his offense. This is huge for the legacy of Jim Harbaugh. This is huge for the development of Tennessee football because Joe Milton has, I believe, 2 or 3 years more of eligibility based on how the COVID year works out at Tennessee. So this could be a guy that could offer Josh Heupel stability until he starts getting his players in, allows him to recruit a quarterback that he wants, let him sit and learn the offense. And it really kind of gives like this nice waiting period for Josh Heupel to, once he hits like his fourth year where everyone's like, okay, now it's time to really win something, he's going to have something built. So I think Joe Milton winning this job is huge because Hendon Hooker probably offer you a year or two of that. But Joe Milton is the long term solution here. And if he's thriving in this offense, it can only mean great things for Tennessee football. And I'm so excited to see him play down up there in Knoxville. But man, I appreciate y'all tuning in. If you're new here, please make sure to subscribe, man. We want y'all to join the Bluebloods before the season, man. We are so pumped for this football season. We hope you are too. I want this to be your one-stop shop for all things college football, man. This is the only YouTube channel out there, man, where we cover FCS, FBS, Group of Five, HBC. We cover every level, every team. So if you got a favorite team, man, we probably talk about them here. So subscribe, tell your friends, families, everything, man. We want to try to hit 1,000 subs. We're so close, man. So we appreciate all y'all support. But guys, we'll be back tomorrow with some more episodes, another fall camp storyline episode. So I appreciate y'all tuning in. But for myself and the Blue Bloods, we are out.